back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angel Baby Kyra. Make sure you like, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I thought I'd try a different format today. Let me know how you guys like it. Today we're going to be talking about the fall of New York Fashion Week, from fashion prestige to influencer playground. I wanted to talk about this obviously because Fashion Week just ended and we're on to Paris and Milan. But I noticed a lot of people on TikTok who went to Fashion Week were basically clowning on how it was basically just a bunch of influencers with really ridiculous outfits, and it just isn't what it used to be. So we're just gonna get into it. New York Fashion Week, once the standard of American fashion, a moment designers, editors, buyers, even foreign press circle twice a year. But today, many say it's lost what's made it great. That New York Fashion Week has quietly become the new LA Fashion Week, which we'll get into more about later. And it's more about social media clout than about clothes, craftsmanship, and creative risk. In this video, we're going to talk about why New York Fashion Week was once so prestigious, its key turning points, what it looks like now, and whether the change is good or not. So let's take it back all the way to 1943 when Eleanor Lambert founded Press Week. This was organized through the New York Dress Institute to give American designers exposure when World War II made Paris shows inaccessible. It was a way to highlight U.S. design innovation and attract attention to something beyond French fashion. Now, the visibility and credibility for Press Week initially was for journalists, press, buyers who had to visit showrooms separately. Eventually, the event grew to include both press and buyers. Magazines like Vogue started featuring American designers more. In 1993, the CFDA, Council of Fashion Designers of America, helped centralize the calendar, giving structure. Now, the CFDA is really important in the fashion industry because they are kind of like, think of it as like accreditation of credibility and also visibility. Hence why the CFDA doesn't really recognize much of the LA Fashion Week shows, which is why a lot of people don't take Fashion Week in LA seriously as much as New York Fashion Week, Paris, and Milan, because these are more prestigious fashion weeks. LA Fashion Week is more, it's very like Hollywood, just for like optics and, you know, press, and just to say that you got to walk in a fashion show. But these designers that are in LA Fashion Week paid thousands and thousands of dollars. As someone who has been in LA Fashion Week as a DJ, as a model, not as a designer, because I am not paying $10K for a runway. And also they exploit a lot of free labor. Stylists, makeup artists, hairstylists, models, of course, are never and hardly ever compensated for their work. This is how these fashion, their money is off of exploitative labor. I mentioned this in my TikTok that Art Hearts Fashion is one fashion production that I volunteered for. It was absolutely exploitative. It was pretty disgusting how they treated a trans girl. They're very, yeah, it was just very icky. Long story short was that she came and she was very early and they kept pushing her to the back of the line to walk. And I was like, hey, she's been here for a while. And she came up to me saying like, oh, I've been here for a while. And I'm like, I know, I've seen you and you said I haven't walked yet. It had been like 2+ hours. So she ends up walking, but I left that day because even that was like the final straw for me, was just like how they treated this person. And I should have known the red flags before, just how exploitative they were. 8+ hour work days and they couldn't even comp the parking was absolutely fucking ridiculous. And they're very, very just prejudiced in that way, but I shall digress. So that same year, in 1993, New York Fashion Week shows moved to Bryant Park, tents behind the New York Public Library, which became the iconic tent shows. Location was near the garment district, editors' offices, showrooms, making logistics easier and reinforcing the industry hub. The garment district, we also have one here in LA, if you don't know, the fashion district, where it is pretty much like the garment district in New York, where there's a bunch of fabric suppliers, sewing suppliers, trims, whatever you can find. Showrooms, I intern at a showroom, there's a bunch of showrooms there. Everything centralized in one place that has to do with the fashion industry. So by the late 20th century, New York Fashion Week was widely considered one of the big 4 fashion weeks globally, aside London, Milan, and Paris, influencing global trends, retail, and media. Designers like Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren, Marc Jacobs built major influence through these shows. Now, here are some key turning points that people think that this is when New York Fashion Week started going downhill. The move from Bryant Park to Lincoln Center in 2010. So these Bryant Park tents got relocated to the Lincoln Center. This was a major change. It was a more formal theater style venue, bigger scale, which means more spectacle. But some felt that this move made the shows less grounded since it wasn't centralized anymore, making it more grandiose and more removed from the designers' neighborhoods and making it less intimate kind of occurrence. Then we have the shift to Spring Studios and decentralization around 2015. New York Fashion Week moved out of the Lincoln Center to Spring Studios and also began dispersing across multiple venues across the city. Hence, this is the kind of format that a lot of the fashion shows tend to follow. Shows, presentations, events became more spread out. This broke some of the centralized avidas and contributed to a more fragmented experience. Now, of course, we gotta segue into the rise of digital celebrity influencers and content-first culture. Before we get into this, I do want to make a comment that I don't think it's bad, or I don't want to knock down anyone for being a fashion influencer. I like to consider myself a fashion influencer, or at least I want to be one, and I don't think that a lot of fashion influencers are into fashion, which I've also talked about. They're into consumerism. So I think when you have this kind of mindset of a bunch of people who are into consumerism instead of the craftsmanship, creativeness, innovativeness in the fashion industry, I feel like there's always going to be some sort of combativeness into gatekeeping also, because a lot of this was gatekept to only buyers, editors, tastemakers even. And I feel like tastemakers used to be definitive kind of position, but now I feel like tastemakers really do include social media influencers, whether we like it or not. So beginning in the 2010s, but accelerating with social media, live streams, bloggers and vloggers, influencers became front row fixtures. Shows started to be designed for content moments, photo ops, installations, and entertainment, sometimes at cost of showmanship or design clarity. And bigger sponsorships, for example, Mercedes-Benz, title sponsors, need for viral visibility, media coverage, these began to shift priorities. Some designers resisted. Some shows became more about branding and less about tailoring or innovations in fabric and design. Implicitly, attention became a major currency. This is more subjective, but tied to the observed evolutions. I want to talk about a recent TikTok that I saw on TikTok about I believe he's a fashion editor. He went to New York Fashion Week to one of the shows. They basically, I'll just let you watch the video.
Hi everyone, I'm a fashion editor and I recently just went to the most offensive New York Fashion Week show I've ever seen. So for legal reasons, I can't name the brand or show any pictures from the show, but this venue looks almost exactly like the venue that the show was in. As soon as I sat down, I noticed something was wrong because the audience was seated in a gradient of skin color. So on one end, there were pale white people, and as the seating went around the runway, the audience got darker and darker and darker. One of my fellow editors was even told by one of the ushers that she looked darker than she did on Instagram and was moved to another section of the audience. At this point, I was so horrified that I was ready to leave the show before it even began, but then suddenly there was a huge commotion. A bunch of men wearing tactical gear came in and started screaming, "We're ICE, please comply," went to the side of the audience with darker complexions and started pulling multiple people and making them leave the venue. Then the lights went down, Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice started playing, and the model started walking. Obviously, the show was trying to make some political statement, and the whole ICE thing with the people being pulled from the show were all actors, but regardless, I found the entire thing incredibly insensitive and disturbing.
It is stuff like this that really seems performative to me, in my opinion, but then people are going to be like, well, how else are they supposed to show it in a fashion show? I understand that sentiment. I understand that way of thinking, but again, I just don't think that it was done in like a very tasteful way, especially like it's still occurring like right now. Like it's still occurring right now. So I just think like we're losing the plot just a little bit of what Fashion Week should be. Talking about Fashion Week now, New York Fashion Week now, front row dynamics are celebrities and influencers, often more visible and valuable than editors or key buyers. The optics of fame do carry weight. So someone that like Angelina Jolie shows up in your front row, then people are like, damn, this brand must be good because Angelina Jolie is this big celebrity, right? Visual coverage often more about who sat front row than what was actually on the runway. An example of this that I can think of is Ice Spice and Lil Nas when they were at New York Fashion Week front row. People were talking about like what they were wearing and that they're actually front row, and this is when Ice Spice was really picking up steam and like in her prime, in her peak era. And I just think that while like all these celebrities get to go to New York Fashion Week, and for a time I thought this was a normal thing until I started reading about Fashion Week, and I was like, wow, that's really kind of crazy. So the venue chaos and decentralization, like I mentioned before, the shows are more spread out different venues. For some designers, this means smaller budgets, more logistical difficulties, just getting the models there, getting their designs there, and having everything in place for the show to run, and feels less cohesive. Some shows are off calendar and some quality varies. So when it's off calendar shows, it's shows or productions that aren't like recognized by the CFDA. Again, like I said, they're really prestigious, and what gives New York Fashion Week its prestigiousness because a lot of its show are on calendar. Not that LA Fashion Week shows not. I feel like LA Fashion Week has less shows that are actually on calendar for CFDA, but I feel like those are the most prestigious shows because obviously they're like an accredited big deal, right? And the quality of these shows, at least for LA Fashion Week that I have done, aren't always necessarily the best, despite them charging thousands and thousands of dollars for designers to show their designs pretty much in front of friends and family and not anyone that's like important. I know that sounds so like but you know, like important, that will be pivotal in your career, which I feel like is kind of the point of Fashion Week, is to show like your designs in front of people who would be like, wow, I like that, and then now you're like setting the tone for the season. The content and experience is chosen over design, and the narrative is that the installations, after parties, brand activations, overall experiences, also the see now buy now trend, which is not always successfully executed, and shows staging and spectacle sometimes overshadowing craftsmanship and innovation, like I've been saying this whole time. And the public access, democratization versus exclusivity. Before it was very exclusive that you couldn't just show up to New York Fashion Week, right? Now it's live streamed, people are vlogging, it's on the internet, and it kind of reduces its exclusivity. And I feel like that's when the social media influencers come in, where it kind of lessens the exclusivity, because these social media influencers for the most part probably aren't in the fashion industry and are just more of it online. And you guys know what I mean. You guys know what social media means. What LA Fashion Week was known for, often considered more informal, more showbiz, entertainment focused, more about influencer presence, less about industry gatekeepers, more about public spectacle, is what New York Fashion Week is today, at least stated by some, and in my opinion, I do agree. The shift towards spectacle, influencer calculus, content, public visibility, and less centralized industry control. Is this entirely bad? It's up to you to decide. Pros are democratization, more voices, designers can do more experimental or hybrid shows, leading to creativity up to the production and designers themselves, and outside big platforms, which means more visibility. The cons is possible loss of depth, just focusing on optics, weaker runway storytelling, less importance for traditional industry tastemakers, and risk of becoming shallow. So was New York Fashion Week's prestige earned? Absolutely. It came from exposure, craftsmanship, industry trust, and centralized structure that created gravity, but over time, many of those pillars have shifted greatly. Today, if you compare New York Fashion Week to what LA Fashion Week long represented, a spectacle, entertainment, content over craft, there's strong similarities. Whether you think that's a good thing or not depends on what you personally love about fashion. So, what do you miss most about New York Fashion Week's old days? Is there a way to recapture the prestige without losing access and spectacle? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I personally still want to go to New York Fashion Week. It's been a dream of mine. I love New York. I really want to experience a real fashion week, but I fear that it might not be that way once I'm able to get there. I feel like it's just a good experience to have. I am grateful for my LA Fashion Week experiences that I've been able to be a part of. I did have like a couple paid gigs in LA Fashion Week, maybe like over the span of 2 years, which was fun. And then also representing like Filipinos and being like a mid-sized plus size model during this time was also very empowering for me. So I was really grateful for that opportunity, and I met really cool people. But yeah, it opened my eyes a lot to learn about LA Fashion Week and how it's just not up there with New York Fashion Week. But I feel like this might ultimately reach all fashion weeks in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.